This is my ranking of the best open-world RPG games I've played, especially ones like Skyrim, based purely on my personal experience. Each game is placed from masterpiece down to trash, depending on how immersive the world feels, how good the exploration is, and how much it keeps me coming back. Let's get straight into the list. Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon starts with a strong setup where I wake up as a prisoner in a dark version of Arthurian legend, and that opening pulled me into a world that feels mysterious and a bit unsettling. As I explored more, I liked how the story slowly revealed itself, with choices that actually change how events play out and how people react to me. The world design stood out, especially the strange environments shaped by the wordness. Combat felt solid with melee weapons and magic, but some builds just didn't work well, and early fights could feel unfair with enemies taking too many hits. Progression also felt slow at times, and bugs did break a few quests during my playthrough. In the end, this lands in the great tier. Fallout 4 places me in a ruined world where every direction leads to something worth checking out, and I kept getting distracted by new locations, strange characters, and unexpected side stories. The main story starts simple, but slowly opens into bigger choices between different factions, and I liked how none of them felt completely right or wrong. What really kept me going was the exploration, since the world feels dense and full of detail, with small environmental stories hidden everywhere. Crafting also became a big part of how I played, as almost every item had value and could be turned into useful upgrades. Gunplay feels much better than older entries, making combat more active, even without relying on VATS all the time. This one clearly belongs in the excellent tier. Dragon Age Inquisition places me in charge of a growing organization trying to restore order in a world filled with chaos, and I liked how that sense of scale kept building as I played. At first it feels like a standard adventure, but over time it expands into something much bigger, where my decisions shape both the story and how my group operates. The world is massive, with different regions that kept leading me toward new quests, hidden areas, and unexpected discoveries, and it rarely felt empty. I also enjoyed managing my party and using the tactical system in combat, which gave me more control during fights. The story itself didn't always stay strong, and some technical issues did break the flow at times. With all that in mind, this finds its spot in the great tier. The Bloodline starts with a simple setup where I play as someone tied to an ancient prophecy, and from there, it opens into a sandbox where I can go almost anywhere and do things in my own way. What stood out early was how every small action gives experience, whether I'm running, climbing, or fighting, which made progression feel natural instead of forced. I liked exploring different areas, picking up quests from random characters, and slowly learning new abilities, especially the rune-based magic system that felt different from typical spells. Combat is decent and flexible, letting me switch between weapons and playstyles, though it doesn't always feel polished. The visuals are simple, but the world still feels alive with things to discover. With all that considered, this settles into the good tier. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor begins with a dark revenge story, and while the plot is decent, what really kept me playing was everything happening outside of it. The combat feels smooth and fast, letting me switch between stealth and open fights without any restrictions, and every encounter can turn chaotic if too many enemies show up. What makes it stand out is the Nemesis system, where enemies remember past fights, grow stronger, and come back with new traits, which made each battle feel more personal and unpredictable. I liked how even losing a fight changed the world instead of just resetting it. Exploration is solid, though not very deep, and the story loses some impact later on. Even with that, this finds its place in the great tier. Blacktail begins with a strange setup where I play as Yaga, an outcast searching for her missing sister, and the story quickly leans into a darker tone with voices in my head and unsettling visions. As I explored, I liked how the morality system shaped my actions, letting me choose between helping or harming, and those choices affected both abilities and how the world reacted to me. The survival elements added another layer, with crafting arrows, cooking food, and managing resources becoming part of the routine. Combat with the bow feels responsive, and boss fights can be quite demanding. The world itself looks great and has a strong atmosphere, but the modern-style dialogue and voice acting didn't always fit the setting, which broke immersion at times. Taking everything into account, this lands in the good tier. Avowed opens with a familiar fantasy setup, but it quickly becomes engaging through its strong writing and the choices I get to make throughout the journey. The story kept me interested as I uncovered the mystery behind the Dream Scourge, and I liked how my decisions could shape different outcomes, even if some twists felt predictable. Exploring each region was enjoyable, with colorful areas, hidden paths, and plenty of side content that added more context to the world. I spent time reading lore, talking to companions, and learning more about the setting, which added depth to everything I was doing. Combat feels smooth, especially when mixing magic with weapons, and experimenting with different builds kept fights interesting, though enemy variety could feel limited after a while. This earns its place in the excellent tier. Outward Definitive Edition brings me into a harsh fantasy world where survival matters just as much as combat, and that balance shapes how I approach everything. Early on, I had to manage food, gear durability, and long travel times, which made every decision feel important instead of routine. There are no clear directions most of the time, so I had to figure things out on my own, and that made exploration feel more personal. I also liked how joining different factions changes the story, giving each playthrough a different path. The co-op option adds another layer, making the journey more dynamic with another player. Combat and mechanics see small improvements here, along with added regions and content, though the game can still feel rough and demanding at times. This finds its way into the great tier. The Outer Worlds 2 takes place in a corporate-driven sci-fi world where every faction has its own agenda, and I spent a lot of time thinking about which side to support. The writing feels sharper this time, with choices that actually carry weight, especially once the story moves past its slower opening and becomes more focused on political conflict. I liked building my character through skills and flaws, since those decisions changed how I approach situations and sometimes created unexpected problems. Exploration across different planets stayed interesting, with plenty of quests, characters, and small stories to uncover along the way. Combat feels smoother compared to before, with better movement and more satisfying weapons, though enemy types repeat too often and areas can feel empty after clearing them. This lands in the good tier. Elden Ring places me in a vast and mysterious world where I'm left to figure everything out on my own, and that sense of freedom kept me engaged for dozens of hours. I spent a lot of time exploring, finding hidden paths, unexpected bosses, and rewards that made every detour feel meaningful. The world design constantly surprised me, with areas connecting in ways I didn't expect and new regions opening up when I thought I had seen everything. Combat stays challenging and forces me to learn enemy patterns, making each victory feel earned rather than handed to me. I also liked how there are no clear markers, so discovery feels natural instead of guided. The story is subtle, but piecing it together through exploration added depth. This belongs in the masterpiece tier. Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning begins with an interesting idea where I play as someone freed from fate, and that setup made me curious about where the story would go. As I spent more time with it, I explored different regions, took on quests, and interacted with various characters, but most of those activities started to feel repetitive and lacked impact. Combat is the strongest part, with fast attacks, magic, and abilities that can be mixed freely, and I liked how easy it is to switch builds at any time. Still, the game feels dated in visuals and design, and it doesn't offer many memorable moments despite its scale. This sits in the good tier. Oblivion Remastered brings me back to a classic RPG world with improved visuals and smoother systems that make it much easier to play today. As I explored, I got into its mix of main story, faction quests, and side activities, and many of those still feel engaging even after all this time. I liked how much freedom the systems allow, especially with spell creation and different ways to build a character, which made experimentation more interesting across different playstyles. The updated interface and quality of life changes also make a clear difference during longer sessions, making navigation and progression less frustrating than before. At the same time, some older design choices are still present, like level scaling and occasional bugs that can interrupt progress. This secures its place in the excellent tier. Hogwarts Legacy lets me step into a magical world where I attend classes, explore Hogwarts, and take part in a larger conflict, and that setting kept me engaged for a long time. Walking through the castle, discovering hidden rooms, and flying across the map made exploration feel rewarding and full of detail. I also liked the combat system, where combining different spells and reacting to enemy attacks made each fight feel active and required some planning. The side activities add a lot, from crafting potions to taking care of magical creatures, which gave me more to do beyond the main story. Characters and companions also add personality to the experience, though the main story itself feels a bit predictable and enemy variety becomes limited later on. This finds its place in the great tier. Avatar Frontiers of Pandora takes me into a visually rich alien world where exploring forests, mountains, and floating landscapes feels impressive right from the start. Moving through the environment is smooth and fast, especially once I unlock flying, which makes traversal much more enjoyable across long distances. I liked how the world reacts with small details, and gathering resources or hunting adds to the immersion during exploration. Combat is solid with a mix of traditional weapons and Navi abilities, but it doesn't change much over time, so fights can start to feel repetitive. Missions also follow a similar pattern, often focusing on clearing outposts and repeating the same objectives across different regions. The story has some strong moments, but characters didn't stay memorable throughout the journey. This lands in the good tier. Dread Delusion takes me into a strange world made of floating islands, where the setting feels unique with its unusual characters and shifting environments. As I explored, I liked how the smaller map design made everything feel more focused, with interesting locations placed close enough to keep things engaging without long empty stretches. The lack of quest markers pushed me to pay attention to directions and the environment, which made exploration feel more involved. Character progression is tied to finding special fragments, which gave me a reason to search every corner. The art style stands out with its surreal look, and the tone mixes dark ideas with some unexpected humor. Combat and difficulty feel quite light, so challenges don't always leave a strong impact. This finds its place in the great tier. Middle-earth Shadow of War builds on what came before with a larger world and more systems, and I noticed the difference as I spent time exploring its different regions and activities. The Nemesis system remains the highlight, creating unique enemies that remember past fights and return stronger, which made each encounter feel personal and unpredictable. I also liked the addition of fortress sieges, where leading an army into battle added a new layer beyond regular missions. Combat feels familiar but expanded, with more abilities and options that keep fights engaging over time. There's a good amount of content, though some areas and enemy types start to feel repetitive after long sessions. The story has its moments but doesn't stay consistent throughout. This finds its place in the great tier. Assassin's Creed Valhalla takes me into a massive world set in England, and while it looks impressive at first, that size quickly becomes a problem during long sessions. I spent a lot of time doing similar activities, forming alliances, clearing areas, and repeating the same patterns without much variation. The combat feels heavy but doesn't evolve in a meaningful way early on, which made the first hours feel slow and lacking depth. I also found the progression system confusing, with upgrades that didn't feel rewarding and abilities locked behind exploration that takes too long. There are some good moments in the story, but they get stretched out across too many hours, and technical issues made things worse with bugs and broken sequences. This falls straight into the trash tier. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt places me in a massive and detailed world where every area feels alive, and I kept finding reasons to explore beyond the main path. While the central story can feel stretched at times, the side quests and contracts stand out with strong writing and meaningful choices that shape how events play out. I liked how decisions don't rely on a clear good or bad system, and instead lead to outcomes that feel natural and sometimes unexpected. Combat feels smooth and responsive, with a mix of swordplay, magic, and preparation that makes encounters more engaging. The world design, weather, and day-night cycle all add to the atmosphere, making it easy to stay invested for long sessions. This stands in the masterpiece tier. Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2 continues a grounded medieval story where I follow Henry through a world focused on realism, and that approach makes everything feel more detailed and believable. I spent a lot of time exploring towns and countryside, and places like large cities feel alive with activities, characters, and side quests that rarely feel repetitive. What stood out most was how each quest had its own structure, often including choices or unexpected turns that kept things interesting. Combat is skill-based and more refined, requiring timing and awareness instead of simple attacks, which made fights more engaging over time. The story also delivers strong moments with emotional weight, though some design choices and bugs can interrupt immersion occasionally. This secures its position in the excellent tier. Immortals: Fenyx Rising takes me into a colorful world based on Greek mythology, and I liked how the setting mixes humor with familiar myths in a light and playful way. Exploring the map feels smooth, with climbing and gliding making movement easy, and different regions have their own visual identity which keeps things interesting as I moved between areas. Combat is fast and flexible, letting me use weapons, abilities, and godly powers in different combinations, which kept fights engaging for a while. The narration between characters adds personality and keeps the tone unique throughout the journey. However, the puzzle design becomes repetitive over time, with many challenges feeling too similar and lacking creativity, which reduces the sense of discovery and slows down progression. This lands in the good tier. That's my list. Your picks might be different, so feel free to share your rankings below. If you enjoyed this, stick around for more straight-to-the-point gaming rankings like this one.